Lightning crashed across the darkened sky as Daniel Fletcher rushed through his rain-soaked fields, desperately trying to salvage what crops he could before they were destroyed. He didn't notice the sleek black car stuck in the muddy ditch beside his property, nor did he see the elegant woman shivering against the storm. He couldn't possibly know that this chance encounter would transform his simple life forever, or that his struggle to save his family farm would soon be read by millions across the globe. The woman watching him work through the punishing rain had made her fortune turning ordinary lives into extraordinary stories, and something about this weathered farmer had already captured her imagination. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Tomorrow's story will be even more amazing, so you won't want to miss it. The rain fell in merciless sheets across the struggling farm, turning the carefully tilled soil into a treacherous mire. Daniel Fletcher squinted against the downpour, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel of his ancient tractor as lightning split the sky. The sudden storm had caught him by surprise, threatening the crops he'd spent months nurturing. This harvest was supposed to be his salvation, the last desperate chance to save the family farm from foreclosure. Now nature seemed determined to wash away his final hope. "Come on, just hold together a little longer," he muttered, patting the tractor's rusted dashboard as it sputtered in protest. The machine was as stubborn as he was, refusing to give up despite being well past its prime. Much like the farm itself, Daniel thought with grim humor. 3 generations of Fletchers had worked this land, but he might be the last if he couldn't make the next mortgage payment. The tractor lurched forward through the mud, headlights cutting weakly through the darkness. Daniel was so focused on navigating the increasingly dangerous terrain that he nearly missed the flash of movement at the edge of his property. Squinting through the rain-streaked windshield, he made out what appeared to be a person waving frantically near the road. "What in the world?" he murmured, steering the tractor in that direction. As he drew closer, the figure came into focus. A woman in a light jacket, completely drenched and looking utterly out of place in the rural landscape. Behind her, partially hidden in the drainage ditch, was the sleek outline of a luxury car, its front wheels submerged in mud. Daniel cut the engine and jumped down, immediately feeling the full force of the storm against his body. "Hey, you all right?" he called out, raising his voice to be heard above the howling wind. The woman turned toward him, relief visible on her face even through the rain. "My car went off the road," she shouted back, gesturing to the vehicle. "I tried calling for help, but there's no signal out here." Drawing closer, Daniel could see she was shivering violently, her thin clothes plastered to her body. She was perhaps in her mid-40s, with striking features and an air of composure that seemed at odds with her current predicament. "You're not going to get that car out tonight, not in this weather," he said, assessing the situation with a practiced eye. "My place is just up the road. You can wait out the storm there. Call someone when the lines are back up." She hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that. I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Fletcher." "Olivia," she replied, her voice nearly lost in a crash of thunder. Olivia Reed. The name tugged at something in Daniel's memory, but he dismissed it as he led her to the tractor. "It's not exactly luxury transportation," he apologized, helping her climb up to the small cabin. "Right now, it looks like a chariot," Olivia said with unexpected humor as she settled into the passenger seat, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. Daniel turned the tractor around and headed back toward the farmhouse, the headlights illuminating the rain like silver needles. He glanced occasionally at his unexpected guest, noting the elegant cut of her clothing beneath the soaking fabric and the way she held herself, straight-backed and dignified despite her discomfort. She was clearly not from around here. "You're a long way from anywhere," he commented as they approached the old 2-story farmhouse. "What brings you out to these parts during storm season?" Olivia's lips quirked into a small smile. "Would you believe me if I said I was looking for inspiration?" Before Daniel could ask what she meant, they arrived at the house. The structure stood solid against the storm, its weathered clapboards and wraparound porch speaking of a more prosperous time. Light spilled from the windows, a warm beacon in the darkness. "Come on," he said, cutting the engine. "Let's get you warmed up." They dashed through the rain to the porch, where Daniel quickly unlocked the door and ushered her inside. The interior was modest but clean, with worn furniture and family photos lining the walls. A small fire burned in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the room. "Wait here," Daniel said, heading to a hallway closet. He returned with a folded towel and what appeared to be clean clothes. "Bathrooms down the hall, first door on the left. These might be a bit big, but they're dry. They were my wife's." Olivia accepted the offerings gratefully. "Thank you. Is she divorced?" Daniel said simply. 4 years now. She moved to Chicago. Turns out farm life wasn't what she had in mind when she said for better or worse. "I'm sorry," Olivia replied, and something in her tone suggested she actually meant it. Daniel shrugged. "It happens. Go on and change. I'll make some coffee." While Olivia disappeared into the bathroom, Daniel moved to the kitchen, filling an old percolator and setting it on the stove. He gazed absently out the window at the storm raging outside, lightning illuminating his struggling fields in brief, harsh flashes. Tomorrow would tell how much damage had been done, but tonight there was nothing more he could do, except offer shelter to a stranger. When Olivia reappeared, she was wearing the flannel shirt and jeans he had given her, the clothes indeed too large but cuffed and tucked to manage. Her dark hair was wrapped in the towel, and without the rain masking her features, Daniel could see she was quite beautiful, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. "Better?" he asked, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "Much." She accepted the steaming cup gratefully. "Though, I'm afraid I've imposed on your hospitality." Daniel chuckled. "It's not exactly the Ritz, but you're welcome to stay until the storm passes. Phone lines will probably be down until morning, knowing how things work around here." Olivia took a sip of her coffee, studying him over the rim of her mug. "You've lived here a long time?" "All my life." Daniel gestured to a framed photo on the wall showing 3 generations of men standing proudly in front of the same house, albeit in better condition. "My grandfather built this place. Passed it to my father, who passed it to me." "And is there someone you'll pass it to?" Olivia asked. A shadow crossed Daniel's face. "That was the plan. But my son..." He trailed off, then shook his head. "He's at college now. Engineering. He's got different dreams, and that's as it should be." Olivia nodded, her eyes moving to other photos on the wall, lingering on one showing a younger Daniel with a teenage boy, both grinning widely and holding fishing rods. "Is that him?" "Yeah, that's Michael. Smart kid. Too smart for farming," his mother always said. Daniel smiled, but there was something wistful in the expression. "Anyway, what about you? You mentioned looking for inspiration. What kind of work do you do?" A strange expression flickered across Olivia's face, something almost like hesitation or wariness. "I'm a writer," she said after a moment. "Anything I might have read?" She smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps. I write under a pen name." Daniel was about to press further when a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, drawing both their attentions. "That's getting worse," he muttered, moving to check that the shutters were secure. "Might be in for a long night." "Does it flood around here?" Olivia asked, concern evident in her voice. "The creek can rise pretty quick," Daniel admitted. "But the house is on high ground. We'll be dry, even if we might be stuck for a bit." As if in response to his words, the lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving them in the dim glow of the fireplace. "And there goes the power," Daniel sighed. "Sorry about that. Happens all the time during storms." "No need to apologize. It's actually rather atmospheric," Olivia replied, her face illuminated by the dancing flames. She looked around the room with renewed interest. "This place must have stories." Daniel found himself watching her, curious about this sophisticated stranger who seemed so at ease in his humble home. "Every old house does, I suppose. Would you tell me some of them?" she asked, settling into an armchair near the fire, coffee cradled between her hands. "I'd love to hear about this place, about your family." Under normal circumstances, Daniel might have deflected such personal questions from a stranger. But there was something disarming about Olivia Reed, something that made him want to talk. Perhaps it was the storm isolating them from the outside world, creating a strange pocket of intimacy. Or maybe it was simply that it had been a long time since anyone had shown genuine interest in his life. Well, he began, stoking the fire before taking a seat across from her. I suppose it starts with my grandfather, Henry Fletcher, who came here with nothing but determination and a dream. As the storm raged outside, Daniel found himself recounting the history of the Fletcher farm, the good years and the bad, the triumphs and struggles that had shaped his family for generations. Olivia listened intently, occasionally asking questions that somehow always led to deeper revelations than he had intended to share. So that's how you ended up fighting the bank alone, she said softly when he explained his current financial predicament. Daniel nodded, surprised at himself for having divulged so much. 6 months to turn things around, or I lose everything my family built, and tonight's storm didn't help matters. What will you do if you can't save it? Olivia asked, her voice gentle but direct. The question hung in the air between them, and Daniel realized it was one he had been avoiding asking himself. I don't know, he admitted finally. Farming is all I've ever done, all I've ever wanted to do. But the industry has changed. Small farms like mine are disappearing all over the country. Yet you keep fighting. It wasn't a question, but an observation. What else can I do? Daniel replied with a shrug. It's not just land, it's my heritage. My son may not want it, but that doesn't mean I can just let it go without a fight. Olivia nodded, her expression thoughtful. Sometimes our greatest stories come from our greatest struggles, she said, almost to herself. Before Daniel could respond, a loud cracking sound split the air, followed by a tremendous crash that shook the house. What the hell? Daniel jumped to his feet, grabbing a flashlight from a drawer. Stay here. He moved to the front door and peered out into the storm. In the beam of his flashlight, he could see that one of the old oak trees that lined the driveway had been struck by lightning and had fallen across the access road, effectively blocking the only way in or out of the property. Well, he said, as he returned to the living room, water dripping from his hair. Looks like you're definitely staying the night. Trees down across the road. Olivia stood, concern on her face. Is there damage to the house? No, we got lucky there. But nobody's getting in or out until that's cleared, which won't happen until the storm passes. I'm sorry to inconvenience you, Olivia said, genuinely apologetic. Daniel waved away her concern. Not your fault. Nature makes its own rules. He checked his watch. It's getting late anyway. Let me show you to the guest room. It's not much, but it's clean. He led her upstairs to a small bedroom that had once belonged to his son. He'd converted it to a guest room after Michael left for college, unable to bear seeing it empty, but preserved, like a museum to his absent child. Bathrooms across the hall if you need it, he explained, setting the flashlight on the nightstand. There are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed if you get cold. Olivia looked around the room, taking in the simple furnishings and the view of the storm-lashed fields visible through the window. This is perfect, thank you. A moment of awkwardness descended as they stood there, two strangers brought together by circumstance, now facing a night under the same roof. Well, Daniel said finally, backing toward the door. If you need anything, I'm just down the hall. Sleep well, Ms. Reed. Olivia, please, she corrected with a small smile. And thank you, Daniel, for everything. He nodded and closed the door softly behind him, making his way to his own bedroom. As he prepared for bed, Daniel found himself thinking about his unusual guest. There was something familiar about her, something he couldn't quite place. And the way she had listened to him, really listened, as though his ordinary life held some fascinating secret. Sleep came slowly that night, with the storm providing a wild soundtrack to his thoughts. Daniel drifted off wondering what kind of books Olivia Reed wrote, and why she had been so vague about her work. Little did he know that while he slept, she sat awake in the guest room, a small notebook open on her lap. Her pen moving swiftly across the page, as she captured impressions of the weathered farmer and his struggling homestead by the light of the storm. Morning arrived with unexpected brilliance, the storm having cleared overnight to reveal a washed-clean world sparkling in the early sunshine. Daniel woke at his usual hour, years of farm life having programmed his body to rise with the sun regardless of circumstances. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of someone else moving about his house. The coffee maker gurgling, cupboard doors opening and closing, soft footsteps across the kitchen floor. Pulling on jeans and a fresh shirt, he made his way downstairs to find Olivia standing at the stove, a spatula in hand as she turned pancakes in his grandmother's cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," she said, glancing up with a smile. "I hope you don't mind, but I thought I'd make breakfast as a small thank you." Daniel blinked in surprise. It had been a long time since anyone had cooked in his kitchen. "No, that's nice of you. Thanks." "The power came back on about an hour ago," Olivia informed him, sliding perfectly golden pancakes onto a plate. "I called for a tow truck, but they said it might be a while. They're dealing with storm damage all over the county." Daniel nodded, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the fresh pot. "I need to check the damage to the crops anyway. Tree on the road, too." He took a sip, eyebrows raising in appreciation. "This is good coffee." "Writer's survival skill," Olivia replied with a wry smile. "I take coffee very seriously." Something about the domestic scene struck Daniel as surreal, this elegant woman in borrowed clothes, cooking in his kitchen as though she belonged there. "So, you never did tell me what kind of books you write," he said, leaning against the counter. Olivia hesitated, her focus seemingly on plating the last pancake. "Contemporary fiction mainly. Character-driven stories. Anything I might know?" She looked up then, meeting his eyes with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Perhaps. Have you read Silent Fields or The Winter Palace?" Daniel's jaw dropped slightly. Those are by O.H. Bennett. The books had been everywhere a few years back, bestsellers that had even been adapted into films. His wife had been obsessed with them, particularly Silent Fields, which told the story of a small-town doctor facing the collapse of both his practice and his personal life. "Yes, they are," Olivia confirmed quietly. "You're O.H. Bennett?" Daniel asked, stunned. "But that's my pen name, yes. O for Olivia, H for Helen, my middle name." Daniel set his coffee cup down carefully, trying to process this information. "Those books sold millions. They made movies out of them." A hint of amusement played at the corners of Olivia's mouth. "Hence the nice car, currently stuck in your drainage ditch. Why didn't you say something last night?" She shrugged, bringing the plates to the small kitchen table. "When you're traveling alone, it's sometimes easier not to advertise who you are. And then, well, you were talking, and I was interested in your story, not in discussing mine." Daniel took a seat across from her, still trying to reconcile this revelation with the woman sitting at his table. "So when you said you were looking for inspiration, I meant it literally." Olivia cut into her pancakes. "I've been struggling with my latest book. My editor thinks I've lost touch with the kind of authentic lives I used to write about. So I decided to take a road trip, get out of my bubble in Boston, see some of the country. Again, find real stories." A thought occurred to Daniel, sending an uncomfortable jolt through him. "Is that what last night was about? Am I some kind of, research project?" Olivia's expression grew serious. "No, I was genuinely stranded, and you were genuinely kind to help me. The fact that I find your life and your struggle compelling doesn't diminish the reality of our interaction." Daniel wasn't entirely convinced, a sense of having been used settling uneasily in his stomach. "So what happens now? You go back to your fancy life and write about the quaint farmer fighting to save his ancestral home?" "Daniel," Olivia began, her voice soft but firm, "I write fiction inspired by reality, not exposés. If anything from our conversation finds its way into my work, it would be transformed, fictionalized." He pushed his half-eaten breakfast away, appetite diminished. "Still feels strange, like you got more out of our conversation than I realized." "A flash of something hurt?" crossed Olivia's features. I apologize if you feel misled. That wasn't my intention. She set her fork down. If it helps, the conversation was valuable to me as a person, not just as a writer. It's been a long time since I've had such an honest exchange with someone who didn't know or care about my public persona. Before Daniel could respond, the sound of a vehicle approaching drew their attention. Through the kitchen window, they could see a tow truck making its way up the driveway, navigating around the fallen tree. That was faster than expected, Olivia remarked, standing. I should get my things. Daniel watched her ascend the stairs, conflicting emotions churning within him. Part of him felt a sense of betrayal at the discovery that his personal struggles might become fodder for public consumption. Yet another part recognized the genuine connection they had formed during their brief acquaintance. By the time Olivia returned, dressed again in her own clothes, now dry but showing the effects of the previous night's downpour, Daniel had cleared the table and was standing by the front door, his expression carefully neutral. Your car should be out of the ditch soon, he said, his tone more formal than it had been earlier. Olivia nodded, clutching her purse and the small notebook he'd glimpsed the night before. Thank you again for your hospitality, Daniel. It meant a great deal to me. Sure, he replied with a shrug. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly, they wouldn't have. What you did, opening your home to a stranger, sharing your story, showing kindness without expectation, that's rare. More rare than you might think. The tow truck operator was already examining Olivia's car, preparing to pull it from the ditch. Time was running short. I should... Olivia gestured toward the door. Right. Daniel stepped aside to let her pass. She paused on the threshold, turning back to face him. Daniel, I'd like to send you something when my new book is published. Would that be all right? He hesitated, then nodded once. If you want to. I do. She reached into her purse and extracted a business card, offering it to him. And if you ever want to talk about anything the farm, your son, anything at all, please call me. I'm a good listener, as you know. Daniel accepted the card reluctantly, noticing the simple design with just her name and contact information, no mention of her literary identity. Goodbye, Ms. Bennett. A small smile touched her lips at his use of her pen name. Goodbye, Mr. Fletcher. Take care of yourself. And then she was gone, walking across the muddy yard to where the tow truck operator had successfully extracted her luxury sedan from the ditch. Daniel watched from the porch as she departed, her car disappearing down the rural road in a spray of water from the previous night's rain. Only after she had gone did he look down at the card in his hand, turning it over to find a handwritten note on the back. Stories matter. Yours matters. Thank you for sharing it with me. With a sigh, Daniel tucked the card into his shirt pocket and turned his attention to the fallen tree blocking his driveway. There was work to be done, as always, and the farm wouldn't save itself. While he stood contemplating enigmatic best-selling authors, he retrieved his chainsaw from the barn and set to work, trying to push thoughts of Olivia Reed from his mind. The days that followed brought a return to routine for Daniel. He assessed the storm damage to his crops, finding it less severe than he had feared, but still a setback he could ill afford. The weather improved, allowing him to salvage what he could and replant where necessary. He worked from dawn until dusk, his body moving through the familiar patterns of farm life, while his mind occasionally drifted to the strange interlude with his unexpected guest. A week passed, then two. The card Olivia had given him remained in his shirt pocket, transferred each morning to whatever shirt he was wearing that day, like a talisman he couldn't quite bring himself to discard. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings when the solitude of the farmhouse pressed in around him, he would take it out and run his thumb over the embossed letters of her name, wondering what kind of story she might craft from their brief encounter. It was nearly a month after Olivia's visit when Daniel's son, Michael, called from college. Their conversations were typically brief and somewhat strained, both of them struggling to bridge the gap between their divergent lives. This call was different. Dad, Michael said, his voice pitched with unusual excitement, I've got this class on contemporary American literature, and you'll never believe what we're reading. What's that? Daniel asked, half listening as he reviewed seed catalogs for the next planting season. Silent Fields by O.H. Bennett. Have you heard of it? Daniel's hand stilled on the catalog page. "I've heard of it," he said carefully. "It's really good. About this doctor in a dying town, trying to save his practice while dealing with his family falling apart. The professor says it's about the decay of rural America, the loss of traditional values, that sort of thing." "Is that so?" Daniel's voice remained neutral, giving nothing away. "Yeah, but Get to See was looking up the author online, and she's working on a new book. There was this interview where she talked about spending time in the Midwest, getting back to the heart of America or something." Michael paused. "She mentioned staying on a family farm during a storm. Kinda made me think of you." Daniel closed the catalog slowly. "That so?" "Yeah. Weird coincidence, right? Anyway, I was thinking maybe I could come home for a weekend soon. It's been a while, and I'd like to see the old place." The change of subject was abrupt, but not unwelcome. "You're always welcome here, Mike. You know that." "Cool. Maybe next weekend? I could help with whatever needs doing around there." A small smile tugged at Daniel's lips. There's always something needs doing on a farm. After saying goodbye to his son, Daniel sat for a long while at the kitchen table, thinking about connections between past and present, between parent and child, between strangers brought together by chance. Finally, he pulled Olivia's card from his pocket and stared at the phone number printed there. Before he could overthink it, he dialed. Olivia Reed. She answered on the third ring, her voice exactly as he remembered. "Ms. Red. It's Daniel Fletcher. The farmer with the ditch and the fallen tree." There was a moment of silence. Then, "Daniel, I'm so glad you called. My son's in college, reading your book. Says, you mentioned staying on a farm during a storm in some interview." Olivia chuckled softly. "I may have. Though I didn't mention any names, of course." "No, I figured you wouldn't." Daniel paused, gathering his thoughts. "He's coming home next weekend. First time in months." "That's wonderful," Olivia said, her pleasure sounding genuine. "Family reconnections are precious." "Yeah, well, I was thinking, if you're still looking for inspiration or whatever, maybe you'd want to come back, meet him, see the farm in better weather." The invitation surprised even him as it left his mouth. The silence that followed stretched just long enough that Daniel began to regret his impulsiveness. "I'd like that very much," Olivia finally replied, her voice warm. "Though I should warn you, I've already started writing something new. Something different for me. Let me guess, struggling farmer loses everything but finds love with a sophisticated city woman?" The joke came easily, a sign of how his feelings about their encounter had evolved. Olivia laughed. "Nothing so predictable. It's about legacy, actually. What we inherit, what we pass on, what we let go of, and about finding connection in unexpected places." "Sounds like a bestseller to me," Daniel said dryly. "We'll see." "So, next weekend?" "Next weekend," he confirmed. "Just don't get stuck in any ditches on your way here." As they finalized the details of her visit, Daniel felt something shift inside him, letting go of old resentments perhaps, or the beginning of something new. Whatever story Olivia might write, his own was taking an unexpected turn, and for the first time in years, he was curious to see where it might lead. When he hung up the phone, Daniel noticed the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, illuminating the worn but sturdy table where generations of his family had gathered. Outside, his fields stretched toward the horizon, waiting for his care. The future of the farm remained uncertain, but in that moment, the burden of its legacy felt lighter somehow, shared with someone who understood its value. Daniel pocketed Olivia's card once more and headed outside. There was still work to be done before his visitors arrived, and he wanted everything to be ready when they came, his son returning to the place of his childhood, and the woman who had seen something worth writing about in his ordinary life. Together, they would create a new chapter in the story of the Fletcher farm, one that Daniel found himself increasingly eager to read. The week leading up to the weekend, visits passed in a blur of activity for Daniel. Beyond his usual farm duties, he found himself engaged in improvements he had long postponed. Fixing the loose boards on the porch steps, repainting the shutters that had faded to a pale ghost of their original green, clearing out the clutter that had accumulated in the guest rooms. Work that had once seemed pointless in his solitude now felt purposeful. As he moved through these tasks, Daniel's thoughts alternated between anticipation and anxiety about the upcoming reunion with his son. Their relationship had grown increasingly distant over the years, damaged first by the divorce, and then by Michael's deliberate steps away from the farming life that had defined the Fletcher family for generations. Their phone conversations remained superficial, skimming above deeper waters neither seemed willing to disturb. And then there was Olivia. Daniel still wasn't entirely sure why he had invited her back, except that something about her presence had made him feel seen in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The fact that she was already incorporating aspects of their brief encounter into her writing should have bothered him more than it did. Instead, he found himself curious about how she perceived him and his struggles, what stories she might craft from the fragments she had glimpsed. Friday evening arrived with golden light spilling across the freshly mowed lawn as Daniel spotted a familiar car coming up the driveway. Michael's second-hand sedan kicked up dust along the gravel, finally coming to rest beside Daniel's truck. For a moment after the engine died, nothing happened, and Daniel wondered if his son was having second thoughts about the visit. Then the door opened, and Michael emerged, looking somehow both older and younger than Daniel remembered. "Hey, Dad," he called, lifting a duffel bag from the back seat. "Mike." Daniel crossed the yard, unsure whether to offer a handshake or a hug, finally settling for an awkward pat on the shoulder. "Good drive?" "Not bad." Traffic was light. Michael glanced around, taking in the farm with what Daniel hoped was appreciation for the improvements, rather than critical assessment of all that still needed attention. "Place looks good." "Trying to keep up with it." Daniel reached for the duffel bag. "Let me take that. Your room's ready." Inside, they moved through the familiar routines of arrival with careful politeness, each mindful of the other's space, neither wanting to disturb the fragile peace between them. Daniel showed Michael to his old bedroom, now stripped of the posters and memorabilia of his youth, but still recognizable in its essential contours. "Bathroom's still across the hall," Daniel said, stating the obvious. "And, I thought we could grill out tonight, if that sounds all right." "Sounds great," Michael replied, setting his laptop case on the desk that had once held schoolbooks and comics. Dad? I thought you mentioned someone else was visiting this weekend. A writer or something?" Daniel felt a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. "Yeah, Olivia Reed. She's coming tomorrow. Got caught in that big storm last month. Ended up staying the night when her car went off the road." Michael's eyebrows rose. "And now she's coming back for a visit? That's interesting." "It's not like that," Daniel said quickly, though he wasn't entirely sure what that was or wasn't. "She's researching for a book or something. Thought it might be good for her to see the farm when it's not half underwater." Michael held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, no judgment here. Actually, it's kind of cool. Is she really O.H. Bennett? Because if she is, my lit professor is going to flip when I tell him I met her. That's what she says." "Wah," Daniel shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Anyway, she'll be here tomorrow around noon. Thought we'd show her around, maybe drive into town for dinner." "Sounds like a plan." Michael smiled, the expression reminiscent of his younger self. "It's actually kind of nice to see you branching out, Dad. Meeting new people." Daniel snorted. "Don't get ahead of yourself. It's just a visit." Later, as they sat on the porch with plates of grilled chicken and corn, the conversation gradually eased from cautious small talk into something more substantial. Michael spoke about his engineering studies, his enthusiasm evident as he described a sustainable agriculture project he was involved with. "It's about integrating modern technology with traditional farming practices," he explained, leaning forward in his chair. "Ways to help small farms like this one survive in the current economy." Daniel paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "Thought you were done with farming." Michael's expression grew thoughtful. "I'm done with farming the way Grandpa did it, yeah. But that doesn't mean I don't care about this place, Dad. I just think there might be different ways to keep it viable." A spark of something hope, perhaps, flared in Daniel's chest. "Such as?" And so the evening unfolded, with Michael sketching visions of solar-powered irrigation systems and precision agriculture techniques, while Daniel listened with growing interest. They didn't resolve anything concrete, but for the first time in years, father and son found common ground in their mutual desire to see the Fletcher farm endure, even if their ideas about how to achieve that goal differed. As they cleared the dishes later that night, Michael paused, a stack of plates in his hands. "Hey, Dad, thanks for inviting me home. I've missed this place more than I realized." Daniel nodded, emotion making words difficult. "It's always here. You're always welcome." Morning brought clear skies and a sense of anticipation that Daniel tried to attribute to the perfect weather for showing off the farm. He and Michael spent the early hours checking fence lines and inspecting the crops, Daniel explaining the changes he'd implemented over the past season, while Michael offered suggestions based on his coursework. The collaboration was tentative but promising, bridging years of misunderstanding. At 11:30, Daniel went inside to shower and change, pointedly ignoring Michael's knowing smirk when he emerged wearing a fresh shirt instead of his usual work clothes. By noon, both men were waiting on the porch, Daniel trying not to check his watch, too obviously. "Relax, Dad," Michael said, amusement coloring his voice. "It's not a job interview." "I know that," Daniel retorted, though in truth, he wasn't sure why he felt so nervous. "Just being polite." At 12:15, a sleek black car much like the one Daniel had seen stuck in the ditch appeared at the end of the driveway. This time, however, it navigated the rural road with careful precision, coming to a smooth stop beside Michael's sedan. "Is that her?" Michael whispered, suddenly sounding like an excited teenager rather than a college student. "That's her," Daniel confirmed, trying to ignore the flutter of anticipation in his stomach as he stood to greet his visitor. Olivia emerged from the car looking entirely different from the rain-soaked woman he had rescued. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and she wore a simple sundress that somehow managed to look both casual and elegant. She smiled when she spotted him, lifting a hand in greeting. "Daniel," she called, approaching the porch with confident steps. "Thank you for inviting me back, Olivia," he replied, suddenly aware of how rough his hands looked against the porch railing. "Good to see you. This is my son, Michael." Michael stepped forward, extending his hand with barely contained excitement. "Ms. Bennett, I mean? Ms. Reed, it's an honor to meet you. I'm actually reading Silent Fields in my American Lit class right now." Olivia laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Please, call me Olivia. And I'm always thrilled to meet readers, especially those studying my work academically." She turned her attention back to Daniel. "Your farm looks beautiful in the sunshine. A far cry from the night I first saw it." "Amazing what a little good weather can do," Daniel said, feeling oddly shy. "Would you like to come in, or would you prefer the grand tour first?" "The tour, definitely," Olivia replied, her eyes already moving past them to take in the expanse of the property. "I've been looking forward to seeing everything properly." As they moved from the house to the barns, then out to the fields, Daniel found himself seeing the farm through new eyes. What had become mundane to him over decades of daily exposure suddenly appeared rich with detail and meaning. He explained the seasonal cycles of planting and harvest, the challenges of modern farming, the history embedded in each structure they passed. Michael occasionally interjected with technical information or childhood anecdotes, creating a fuller picture than Daniel could have provided alone. Olivia absorbed it all, asking thoughtful questions that revealed both her intelligence and her genuine interest. She carried a small notebook, jotting occasional notes, but mostly simply observing. Daniel caught her, sometimes pausing to close her eyes, as though imprinting a sensory memory. The scent of warming soil, the rustle of corn leaves in the breeze, distant calls of birds. "It's beautiful here," she said as they reached the highest point on the property, a gentle rise that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding countryside. "I can see why your family has fought so hard to keep it." Daniel squinted into the distance, seeing beyond the current reality to the farm's history and uncertain future. "It hasn't been easy, especially lately." Michael, who had been walking slightly ahead, turned back to face them. "Dad's being modest. He's kept this place going through drought, economic downturns, and corporate farming competition. Not to mention my mom leaving, and me choosing engineering over agriculture. Michael, Daniel began, uncomfortable with the praise. No, it's true, his son insisted. You've been carrying this place on your own shoulders. I just think maybe you don't have to anymore. Olivia glanced between them, clearly sensing the undercurrent of a conversation that had been ongoing before her arrival. Perhaps we could discuss some of this over lunch? I don't know about you two, but I worked up quite an appetite touring the lower 40. Her deliberate use of farming terminology brought a smile to Daniel's face. Sounds good to me. Back at the house, they fell into an easy collaboration preparing sandwiches and iced tea. The kitchen, which had felt so empty for so long, now hummed with conversation and movement as the three of them worked around each other with surprising harmony. Over lunch, Michael expanded on the ideas he had shared with his father the night before. Now, including Olivia in the discussion, she listened attentively, occasionally offering insights based on similar initiatives she had encountered during her research for previous books. The real challenge, Michael was saying, is capital investment. The technology exists to make sustainable practices more profitable for small farms, but the upfront costs are prohibitive. What about grants? Olivia suggested. There are several foundations focused specifically on preserving family farms through innovation. Daniel shook his head. Tried that route. Too much competition, too little funding. What about a cooperative approach? Olivia persisted. Several farms in the area pooling resources? The conversation continued, possibilities expanding and contracting as they explored various angles. Daniel found himself engaged in a way he hadn't been in years. His usual fatalism, giving way to cautious consideration of options he had previously dismissed. You know, Michael said during a lull, you could write about this, Olivia. The struggle to preserve family farming traditions in the face of corporate agriculture. It's a story that needs telling. Olivia's eyes met Daniel's across the table. I think I already am, she said softly. Later, as afternoon stretched toward evening, Michael announced he was heading into town to meet an old high school friend for coffee. The timing seemed suspiciously convenient to Daniel, who shot his grate. Son a questioning look. What? Michael asked with exaggerated innocence. Jason's only in town for the weekend too. I'll be back for dinner. We're still doing that steakhouse in town, right? That's the plan, Daniel confirmed, resigning himself to his son's transparent matchmaking efforts. After Michael departed, a new awareness settled between Daniel and Olivia, the absence of the buffer his son had provided, making their interactions more direct, more charged with unspoken possibilities. He's a remarkable young man, Olivia commented as they settled on the porch swing, glasses of iced tea in hand. You must be very proud. I am, Daniel agreed, though I'm not sure how much credit I can take. He's very much his own person. Children usually are, Olivia replied with a small smile. But they carry pieces of us with them, whether they recognize it or not. The observation led Daniel to ask, Do you have children? Olivia shook her head. No. My career took precedence, and then the right relationship never materialized. One of life's roads not taken, I suppose. Do you regret it? She considered the question with the thoughtfulness he had come to expect from her. Sometimes, but regret is a complicated emotion, isn't it? You can acknowledge the absence of something in your life without wishing your entire life had been different. Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. That's how I feel about Ellen, my ex-wife. I regret that our marriage failed, but I can't regret the years we had together, or Michael wouldn't exist. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the swing moving gently beneath them as afternoon light filtered through the old oak trees Daniel's grandfather had planted. May I ask you something personal? Olivia said finally. Seems only fair, given how much of my life story you already know, Daniel replied, his tone lighter than it might have been a month ago. Why did you invite me back? Really? The question caught him off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Olivia was a writer after all, attuned to the nuances of human motivation. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure, Daniel admitted. Part of it was Michael's interest in your books. Part of it was... He trailed off, searching for the right words. Was? Olivia prompted gently. You made me see this place differently, he said finally. Made me remember why it matters, why I've been fighting so hard to keep it. And I guess I wanted to share that with you, with the farm looking its best instead of half drowned. Olivia's expression softened. Thank you for that honesty. And for what it's worth, I think I understand. Sometimes we need an outside perspective to reconnect with what's most precious to us. Is that why you're writing about it? About me? The question had been hovering between them since her arrival. Partly, she acknowledged. But it's more than that. Your story resonates with themes I've been trying to explore in my work for years: tradition versus progress, the meaning of home, the legacies we inherit, and the ones we choose to create. She paused, then added, and there's something about you, Daniel. A kind of quiet integrity that's becoming rare in this world. Daniel felt heat rise in his face at her praise. I'm just a farmer trying to keep my head above water. No, Olivia said firmly. You're much more than that, and I think you know it, even if you're uncomfortable admitting it. Their eyes met, a current of understanding passing between them that transcended their different backgrounds and experiences. In that moment, Daniel glimpsed what Olivia might see in him, not just material for her writing, but something worthy of genuine admiration. Before either could speak again, the sound of tires on gravel announced Michael's return. Spell broken. They moved apart slightly on the swing, though Daniel found himself reluctant to break the connection entirely. Ready for the best steak in 3 counties? Michael called as he bounded up the porch steps, either not noticing or tactfully ignoring the charged atmosphere. Absolutely, Olivia replied, rising from the swing. Just let me freshen up first. As she disappeared into the house, Michael gave his father a knowing look. Don't start, Daniel warned. I didn't say anything, Michael protested, failing to suppress his grin. You didn't have to, Daniel grumbled, but there was no real annoyance in his tone. In truth, he felt lighter than he had in years, as though some long-carried burden had begun to shift. The evening at the steakhouse passed in a haze of good food, better conversation, and a sense of possibility that seemed to expand with each shared story and burst of laughter. The locals, long accustomed to Daniel's solitary presence, cast curious glances at his companions, particularly when word spread that the elegant woman at his table was none other than O.H. Bennett, whose books occupied prominent places on many of their shelves. By the time they returned to the farm, stars glittered overhead in the clear spring sky, more visible here away from city lights than they would ever be in Boston. Daniel found himself pointing out constellations to Olivia as they stood in the yard, Michael having tactfully excused himself to make a phone call. It's so different here, Olivia murmured, her head tilted back to take in the celestial display. In the city, you forget how vast the sky really is. That's one of the things I've always loved about this place, Daniel replied. No matter how big your problems seem, that sky puts things in perspective. Olivia turned to face him, her expression thoughtful in the moonlight. Daniel, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. What's that? When my book is finished, the one partly inspired by you and this place, would you read it before it's published? I value your perspective. The request surprised him. I'm not exactly a literary critic. That's not why I'm asking, Olivia said. You're the heart of the story, in a way. I want to be sure I've captured the essence of what you've shared with me, what I've observed here. Daniel considered for a moment, then nodded. I'd be honored. A smile bloomed across Olivia's face, visible even in the dim light. Thank you. That means more than you know. As they stood there beneath the vast canopy of stars, Daniel felt something shift within him, a recognition that the story of his life, which he had thought was narrowing toward a predetermined conclusion, might still hold unexpected chapters. Whatever narrative Olivia crafted from their encounters, his own lived experience was continuing to unfold in ways he could never have anticipated when he pulled her car from a rain-soaked ditch. The remainder of the weekend passed too quickly, filled with further explorations of the farm, long conversations that ranged from the practical to the philosophical, and moments of connection that grew increasingly meaningful. By Sunday afternoon, when it came time for both visitors to depart, Daniel found himself reluctant to see either of them go. Michael left first, promising to return soon with more detailed plans for the sustainable agriculture initiatives they had discussed. The goodbye was different from previous partings, warmer, more hopeful, laden with plans rather than regrets. "Take care of yourself, Dad," Michael said, embracing him with genuine affection. "And maybe think about what we talked about. This place doesn't have to be exactly like Grandpa ran it to still be the Fletcher farm." "I'll think about it," Daniel promised, surprised to find he actually meant it. After Michael's car disappeared down the driveway, Daniel turned to find Olivia watching him with a gentle smile. "You two have made progress," she observed. "Seems that way," Daniel agreed. "Though I'm not sure how much credit I can take for that. More than you think, perhaps." Olivia checked her watch reluctantly. "I should be going too. I have meetings in Chicago tomorrow that I can't reschedule." Daniel nodded, an unexpected heaviness settling in his chest. "Of course. You've got your real life to get back to." "This is real too," Olivia said quietly, gesturing to encompass the farm, the weekend, the space between them. "Different, but no less real than book deadlines and publishing meetings." They walked to her car in silence, each seemingly reluctant to break the connection that had formed over the past days. When they reached the vehicle, Olivia turned to face him. "Daniel, I meant what I said about sending you the manuscript when it's ready, but I'd like to stay in touch before then, if that's all right with you." "I'd like that," he replied, surprising himself with his certainty. "Good." She reached out, briefly touching his weathered hand with her slender fingers. "Thank you for this weekend, for sharing your home and your story. It's been—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Illuminating." As she drove away, Daniel remained standing in the yard long after her car had disappeared from view, considering all that had transpired over the weekend and what might lie ahead. The farm still faced serious challenges, his financial situation remained precarious, and yet somehow, the future seemed less bleak than it had just days before. Inside the house, the evidence of his visitors lingered: coffee mugs on the counter, a forgotten sweater draped over a chair, the subtle scent of Olivia's perfume. Daniel moved through the rooms, not erasing these traces but noting them, appreciating the way they temporarily transformed the space from a house to a home. In the guest room where Olivia had stayed, he found a book on the nightstand, a hardcover copy of Silent Fields with a note tucked inside. He opened it to read. "For Daniel, whose fields are anything but silent. Thank you for letting me listen to their story. Olivia." The days following his visitor's departure settled back into familiar rhythms, but with subtle differences that kept Daniel from slipping entirely into his old isolation. He found himself exchanging regular texts with Michael, their conversations expanding beyond farm business to include personal reflections and shared observations. And there were emails from Olivia, thoughtful missives that ranged from updates on her writing progress to questions about seasonal changes on the farm to reflections on books and ideas she thought might interest him. 6 weeks after her visit, a package arrived containing a laptop computer with a note explaining that Olivia had noticed his ancient desktop during her stay and thought this might make their correspondence easier. Daniel's initial impulse was to return. The gift seemed too extravagant, but practicality won out. The old computer had been limping along for years, and having a reliable way to research agricultural innovations and communicate with both Michael and Olivia was increasingly important. Summer arrived with its relentless demands, and Daniel found himself implementing some of the sustainability practices Michael had suggested. The initial results were promising: better water conservation, reduced need for expensive chemical inputs, healthier soil. It wasn't enough to solve all his financial problems, but it offered a path forward that had seemed impossible just months before. Throughout the demanding season, his contact with Olivia remained a bright thread woven through the fabric of his days. There were evening video calls where she would show him the view from her Boston apartment while he offered tours of new developments on the farm. There were exchanges about books she recommended, and he somehow found time to read, discovering a love for literature he had never fully explored. And there were conversations that delved deeper into their respective lives, creating an intimacy that defied the physical distance between them. By late August, when Olivia called to announce she had completed the first draft of her new novel, Daniel realized with a start that she had become one of the most important people in his life. "I'd like to bring it to you in person," she said, her image slightly pixelated on his screen, but her excitement clear nonetheless. "If that's all right." "Of course," Daniel replied, perhaps too quickly. "When?" "Next week?" "The timing's good. I submitted the manuscript to my editor, but there's time for revisions before it goes to print, and I'd like to see the farm in summer before harvest begins." They arranged the details with an ease born of their months of correspondence, and Daniel found himself anticipating her arrival with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He was eager to see her again, to continue in person the conversation that had been unfolding between them across the miles. But he was also nervous about her novel, about seeing himself transformed into fiction, about how she might have interpreted his life and struggles. When Olivia arrived, the reunion was both familiar and new. They embraced without hesitation, the months of digital communication having bridged the awkwardness that might otherwise have colored their greeting. She looked much as he remembered, though perhaps more relaxed, her smile coming more readily. "The farm looks amazing," she said, as they walked from the driveway to the house, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm with natural ease. "All these new systems Michael was telling me about, they're really making a difference, aren't they?" Daniel nodded, pride evident in his bearing. "It's early days yet, but yes, the soil quality is already improving, and we're using about 30% less water than this time last year." Inside, over coffee at the kitchen table that had hosted so many meaningful conversations, Olivia reached into her bag and withdrew a thick stack of paper bound with a simple clip. "Here it is," she said, sliding it across to him. "I've been calling it Inheritance as a working title, but that might change." Daniel regarded the manuscript with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. "And I'm in here? Somewhere?" Olivia smiled softly. "You're everywhere in here, Daniel. Not literally, the main character isn't you exactly. He's older, his farm is in Vermont rather than the Midwest, his family history is different. But the soul of the story, the questions it's asking about legacy and adaptation and finding meaning in a changing world, that all started here, with you." End quote. He ran his hand over the cover page, feeling the weight of the creation she had entrusted to him. "I'll read it tonight." "Take your time," Olivia urged. "It's not a test. I just want your honest reaction, whatever that might be." That evening, after showing Olivia the latest improvements to the farm and sharing a quiet dinner on the porch, Daniel retreated to his room with the manuscript while she settled in the guest room to work on her next project. He had never been a particularly fast reader, but he found himself drawn into the narrative with unexpected intensity. The story centered on a character named William Harper, a widowed farmer in his 60s facing the possible loss of his family's historic Vermont apple orchard. The financial pressures William faced echoed Daniel's own struggles, but Olivia had woven complexities into the character that went far beyond Daniel's experience. A troubled relationship with a daughter who had abandoned in Ober, the family business, a local community in the midst of gentrification as wealthy urbanites purchased vacation properties, an evolving understanding of his own place in a world that seemed increasingly indifferent to the values he had built his life around. What struck Daniel most powerfully, however, was not the plot, but the depth with which Olivia had captured the emotional landscape of agricultural life, the bone-deep connection to the land, the weight of family expectations across generations, the terrible vulnerability of being at the mercy of forces beyond one's control, from weather to market fluctuations to shifting cultural priorities. She wrote with such insight that Daniel often had to pause, moved by the recognition of feelings he had never fully articulated even to himself. He read through the night, finishing as dawn began to lighten the sky outside his window. The novel's ending was neither simplistically happy nor tragically bleak. William didn't miraculously save the orchard through some last-minute windfall, but neither did he lose everything he valued. Instead, he found a middle path, letting go of certain traditions while preserving the core of what made the land meaningful to him, and in the process, reconstructing his relationship with his estranged daughter. When Daniel finally set the manuscript aside, He felt both drained and strangely energized, as though he had undergone some cathartic experience that left him seeing his own situation with fresh clarity. After a quick shower, he made his way downstairs to find Olivia already in the kitchen, preparing coffee with the familiarity of someone who belonged there. "You look like you haven't slept," she observed, handing him a steaming mug. "I haven't," he confirmed. "Couldn't put it down." Olivia's expression revealed both pleasure and anxiety. "And? What did you think?" Daniel took a sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. "It's not what I expected," he said finally. "I thought, I don't know, that I'd be embarrassed to see myself in print, or that you might have romanticized farm life, or made it into some kind of political statement. But," Olivia prompted when he paused, "but it's none of those things. It's real, even with all the differences between me and William. It feels true. You captured something essential about what it means to live this life, to care for land that's been in your family for generations, to face the possibility of being the one who loses it." Hote. Relief washed over Olivia's features. "That's what I hoped for. Not to tell your specific story, but to honor the essence of it." "You did," Daniel assured her. He hesitated, then added, "There's something else, though. Something that surprised me." "What's that?" "The book isn't really about the farm at all, is it? It's about change. About learning to let go of how you thought your life would be, and finding value in what it's becoming instead." Olivia's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, exactly. That's the heart of it." She reached across the table to take his hand. "Daniel, you're the first person to read this outside of my agent and editor. Your response means everything to me." The touch of her hand against his sent warmth spreading through Daniel's chest. "Well, for what it's worth, I think it's brilliant. The best kind of story, one that feels both specific and universal at the same time." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, hands still joined across the table, the morning light streaming through the kitchen windows creating a golden haze around them. "What happens now?" Daniel asked finally. "With the book, I mean. Now it goes through the publishing machine," Olivia explained. "Editing, design, marketing plans. It should be out next spring." "And what about you? Where do you go from here?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning that extended beyond her professional plans. Olivia met his gaze steadily, seeming to understand the layers of his inquiry. "That depends," she said carefully. "I have a life in Boston, my apartment, my friends, my publishing connections. But these past months have made me realize how limited that life had become, how insulated from the kinds of experiences and connections that make for meaningful writing and meaningful living." Daniel nodded, hearing what she wasn't explicitly saying. "Distance makes that difficult." "It does," Olivia agreed. "Which is why I've been thinking about changes I might make. My writing doesn't require me to be in any particular location. I could work from anywhere with an internet connection." Hope bloomed in Daniel's chest, but he tempered it with practicality. "The nearest town with decent amenities is 40 minutes away. The winters here are brutal. And a working farm isn't exactly a luxury retreat." A smile played at the corners of Olivia's mouth. "Are you trying to talk me out of what I haven't quite proposed yet?" "Just making sure you understand what you'd be getting into," Daniel replied, a matching smile tugging at his lips. "I think I have a pretty good idea," Olivia said, squeezing his hand. "I've spent the past 6 months getting to know this place through your eyes. And I'm not suggesting I move in tomorrow, but I am suggesting we explore whether there might be a way to bridge our two worlds." Daniel turned her hand over in his, tracing the lines of her palm with his calloused thumb. "I'd like that." And so began a new chapter neither of them had anticipated when Olivia's car went off the road during that spring storm. Over the following months, as summer gave way to fall and harvest kept Daniel working from dawn until dusk, Olivia divided her time between Boston and the farm, gradually staying longer with each visit. She set up a small office in what had once been Daniel's father's study, the room transformed by her presence from a storage space for forgotten papers into a vibrant work environment where her next novel began to take shape. Michael visited regularly, bringing new ideas and technology that gradually modernized aspects of the farm operation. The three of them formed an unlikely team, each contributing different strengths to the shared project of bringing the Fletcher farm into a sustainable future. The financial situation remained challenging, but with diversified crops, reduced input costs, and a small direct-to-consumer organic produce business that Olivia helped establish, the immediate threat of foreclosure receded. By the time Inheritance was published the following spring, the novel's exploration of adaptation and renewal had been mirrored in Daniel's own experience. The book received glowing reviews, with critics praising Olivia's sensitive portrayal of rural life and her nuanced examination of how traditions evolve across generations. It quickly rose to the bestseller lists, bringing a wave of interview requests and public appearances that temporarily pulled Olivia back into her previous world. But she always returned to the farm, to Daniel, to the life they were carefully building together. And when a film producer expressed interest in adapting Inheritance for the screen, Olivia insisted on clauses in the contract that would protect the privacy of the man and the place that had inspired it. "Your story is still yours," she told Daniel one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the fields in gold and crimson. "I just borrowed pieces of it for a while." Daniel smiled, pulling her closer against his side. "Our story isn't finished yet." "No," Olivia agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. "I think we're still in the early chapters." Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed generations of Fletchers working the land below. But for the first time in years, Daniel looked up at them, not with the weight of obligation, but with a sense of possibility for the farm, for his relationship with his son, and for the unexpected love that had arrived during a storm and transformed everything. When Olivia's next book was published 18 months later, the dedication page read simply, "For Daniel, who offered shelter from a storm and found his way into every word I write." By then, she had made the farm her primary residence, her Boston apartment maintained mainly for occasional publishing business. The adjustments hadn't always been easy her urban sensibilities sometimes clashing with the realities of rural life. His ingrained routines occasionally resistant to her presence, but the friction had ultimately strengthened rather than weakened their connection. On the first anniversary of Inheritance reaching the bestseller list, Daniel presented Olivia with a small wooden box he had crafted from oak harvested on the property. Inside lay a simple ring, not ostentatious, but beautiful in its craftsmanship. "I'm not getting any younger," he said with characteristic directness as they stood among the fields that had sustained his family for generations. "And I'd like to know that whatever time I have left, I'll spend it with you." Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she slipped the ring onto her finger. "I can't imagine being anywhere else." Their wedding the following spring was small but joyful, held on the property with Michael serving as best man and Olivia's longtime editor as maid of honor. The guests included a mix of local farming families who had known Daniel all his life, and literary figures from Olivia's professional circle, an unlikely convergence of worlds that somehow worked perfectly. As they exchanged vows beneath an archway built from timber reclaimed from one of the old barns, Daniel found himself reflecting on the strange series of events that had led to this moment. A spring storm, a car in a ditch, a chance meeting between two people who might otherwise never have crossed paths. What had begun as simple hospitality had evolved into the most unexpected chapter of his life, proving that even in the most ordinary existence, extraordinary possibilities await. Later that evening, as friends and family celebrated around them, Olivia leaned close to whisper in her new husband's ear, "You know what the best part of this story is?" "What's that?" Daniel asked, his arm secure around her waist. "It's entirely our own," she replied. "No one would believe it if I put it in a book." Daniel laughed, pulling her closer for a kiss. "That I guess we'll just have to keep living it instead." And so they did, writing their shared story day by day across the changing seasons of the farm, proving that sometimes the most meaningful narratives are those that unfold when we least expect them, shaped by the courage to welcome strangers, the willingness to embrace change, and the faith that even in the darkest storms, unexpected light can find its way through.